Listening Part D, Longer Talks. Exercise 10. Listen to a conversation between a teacher and a student.
Professor Mueller, I've almost finished preparing my presentation for your class, but I'm not really satisfied with it. Could you give me some advice?
I'll be happy to. What topic did you choose?
It's about methods of predicting earthquakes, but so far it's just a lot of facts and figures. How can I make it more interesting?
Maybe you could use some computer graphics to help the class make sense of your statistics. Number 1. What will the main topic of this conversation probably be? Listen to part of a discussion in an economics class. The class has been studying taxation.
In last Friday's class, I asked him to read the first part of Chapter 22 about taxation. The text says there are two main types of taxation. Anyone remember what they are? Yes, Troy? I think the book said they were direct and indirect, right? Right, Troy. And can anyone define direct taxation? Cheryl?
That's when the person or firm who is taxed pays to the government directly, like income tax.
You got it. And so, indirect taxation...
If I understand the book, it's when the person or firm who is taxed passes the tax on to someone else. A good is imported into a country, the government taxes the company that owns it, and then that company charges customers. That's indirect taxation, right?
Yes, exactly. Can anyone think of another example? Troy? Well, last year the city raised property taxes, and my landlady raised my rent to help pay the higher taxes. Is that an example? It certainly is. Cheryl, you have a question?
Yes, Professor. I was just wondering, what about sales taxes? Are they indirect or direct?
Good question. I'll let you all think about that for a minute, and then you tell me.
Number 2. What are the main purposes of this discussion? Listen to the following conversation in a university library. I'm in Professor Quinn's political science class. She told us that she put some articles on reserve for her class. Yes, those would be at the reserve desk. Do you need a library card to look at those articles? No, just a student ID card. If you've never checked out any reserve materials, I can tell you what you need to do. Number 3. What will the main subject of this conversation probably be? Listen to part of a lecture about a dance program. Since all of you have expressed interest in joining the university dance program, I probably don't have to say much about the physical and psychological rewards of being in a dance program such as this one. Instead, I want to concentrate on some of the drawbacks. The early mornings and late nights, the aches and pains, and the physical exhaustion, and all the other sacrifices you'll be called on to make if you are chosen for the program. And if, despite what you hear, you still want to try out for the program, I'll let you know how to set up your preliminary dance audition. Number 4. What will the rest of this talk mainly be about? Listen to a conversation between two students.
Well, I had a pretty relaxing vacation. How about you, Tina?
I wouldn't exactly call it relaxing, but it certainly was interesting.
I remember you said you were either going to Europe or you were going to work at your parents' company.
I changed my mind and didn't do either. My anthropology professor talked me into volunteering for an archaeological project in New Mexico. Number 5. What will the two speakers probably discuss? Listen to part of a discussion in a psychology class. Excuse me, Professor Norton, I'm a little confused.
Why is that, Deborah?
Well, when you were talking about ESP, you said that most scientists today don't believe it exists.
That's right. First, does everyone in class know what ESP is? Sure. ESP means extrasensory perception, mind reading and that kind of thing. Good definition. It's sometimes called parapsychology.
Well, the reason I'm confused is that I read an article about ESP studies at some university. It said that the researchers concluded that a number of people did have ESP abilities.
You're probably thinking of the experiments at Duke University. A professor named J.P. Rhine established a parapsychology lab there about 50 years ago, and he developed experiments that seemed to show that some people had remarkable ESP talents.
Yes, that's it. I remember it was at Duke University.
So, Professor, what happened to change everyone's minds about ESP? Well, since then, a lot of researchers have decided that Rhine's evidence was questionable. Today, when experiments are more carefully controlled, similar performances are rare. And in science, the trend should be the opposite. What do you mean, Professor? Well, if the phenomenon you're investigating is real, and the experiments are improved, then the results you get should be more certain, not less certain.
So you don't think ESP is possible?
Well, let's just say that I don't think there's any experimental proof for it.
Number 6. What are the speakers mainly discussing? Listen to part of a lecture in an American history class.
Good afternoon. I'm Robert Wolf, President of the State Historical Society. Professor Lewis has asked me to give a guest lecture. I'm going to give you a short presentation on some famous shipwrecks, especially ones that took place in the waters off New England. And I'm going to spend most of my time explaining how a study of shipwrecks can contribute to an understanding of history.
Number 7. What is this lecture primarily going to concern? This is a part of a lecture given in an advertising class.
Good morning, students. In our last class, we were talking about regulation in the advertising industry. In fact, as you may remember, I said advertising was one of the most heavily regulated industries in the United States. And I gave as an example a law that prohibits advertising tobacco products on television. Now, in today's class, I want to tell you about self-regulation in advertising, which the industry has adopted as a way to stop abuses before they can occur. As we'll see, these self-imposed codes of ethics are intended to control not only bad taste, but also misrepresentation and deception, although, of course, they don't always work. Any questions before we get started?
Number 8. What will the rest of the lecture probably concern?